Okay, well, let's assume it's the 12th today. Now, I wanted to issue an apology, first of all, for something I said on my most recent broadcast, and my thanks to Colette Walker of the ISP for actually making it clear to me what I got wrong on the other programme. Now, I had mentioned that Nigel Farage's party, the Reform Party, was in fact a company, and as I pointed out, not a party. That was wrong, though, because despite it actually being a company as well, it was registered as a party, and its emblems, that's the I suppose the graphics which go along with that, had to be registered with the Electoral Commission before Farage was allowed to stand any candidates in the recent general elections. So I apologise to my viewers for making a mistake. As you know, this programme goes out very quickly and I have a very limited time to research these things, so sometimes I miss stuff. Anyway, that was a mistake. So I also apologise to Mr Farage for giving the impression that his party wasn't a party when it actually is. Anyway, let's move on from apologies and on to something a little bit more controversial. Now, I've spoken already at some length about Grangemouth and its closure and what the ramifications of this might be in the future for Scotland when it becomes independent. However, I think it's important to realise that what happened to Grangemouth and what is going to continue happening to Grangemouth, in fact, is not just a business decision, as the United Kingdom and also Petro-Ineos would like us to believe. There is a very big political aspect to why this was done. Now, ostensibly, the British government has said that this was a business decision. The Scottish government has agreed with this, actually, that it was a business decision made by Petro-Ineos to close that plant down and to invest some £600 million into a new plant in Belgium. Now, while this is true that it was, from their side of things, a business decision, that business decision was largely facilitated by a political move made by the Labour government. What do I mean? Well, think of it this way. Who would be most disadvantaged by Grangemouth being closed down? The answer to that is very obviously Scotland, because we are the only oil-producing nation in the world now, and probably one of the largest oil producers, if not the largest oil-producing nation in the European Union, which now does not have its own refinery. But compare that to Belgium, which has no oil production of its own at all, and yet has 4 refineries and chemical plants, and now is going to have a massively expanded capability in that field, thanks to Jim Ratcliffe, beg your pardon, Petro-Ineos and the UK government. So how was it done? Well, I think it's obvious to most of us that this was done in the usual British way, with a mixture of bribery and coercion. Now, in the case of Mr Ratcliffe, it was obvious to the British government that he needed to be persuaded to close this plant down for their own political reasons. Now, the Labour Party obviously wants Scotland to be poorer, it wants it to be diminished, it wants it to be less able to support itself when it's independent. And also, I think it's important to remember that this particular move also diminished Scotland's status on the world stage as an oil-producing nation in its own right. So it had a lot of dimensions. So how did they do this? Well, it was pretty simple, really. The British state realised that Mr Ratcliffe, who is a majority shareholder, I believe, in this Anglo-Chinese oil corporation, and remember, the Chinese own a huge stake in Petro-Ineos. We'll come back to that later on. They realised that Mr Ratcliffe owned a football club. And that football club, as far as I understand it, is Manchester United. Now, but before people jump on me and say, well, he may not own all of it. Yeah, he may not own all of it, but he has a substantial holding in Manchester United. And being an Englishman and perhaps a football fan, you could imagine the British state thinking, well, he probably would like us to help him with that. And how could we help him? Well, Old Trafford football ground in Manchester has been needing a refurbishment for some time. So the best way to hold a carrot in front of Mr Ratcliffe would be to state that we will give you £1 billion to redevelop Old Trafford. And that's pretty much what is happening. So that was the first inducement. Now, the second inducement was from a business point of view. So having made this personal bribe to Mr. Ratcliffe in the form of Old Trafford and help with that, they then went on to bribe his company as well. So Petro-Ineos, being an Anglo-Chinese concern, is a multinational corporation. And operating in the United Kingdom with a refinery in Scotland, when it's plain that they cannot really do business with Europe, they can't sell that refined fuel outside of the UK. And also, I think, from the political point of view, again, it made sense for Labour to cripple Scotland's ability to refine so that all refining would happen in England for the domestic market, but also to induce Mr. Ratcliffe's corporation and its Chinese owners as well to shift their emphasis was quite easy by offering a loan guarantee for £600 million worth of loans to invest in a new or an expanded petrochemicals plant in, yep, you've guessed it, Belgium, which is in the European Union. And why would that be important? Well, from the point of view of Petro-Ineos as a multinational corporation partly owned by China, it made more sense for them to invest their money into a refining plant which could serve 27 other nations' needs. And that is why this is now happening. So effectively, China, which, although it's not an oligarchy, is a huge player in the international field when it comes to investment in big infrastructure, has been enticed away from Scotland and into Europe by a Labour government which says it has no interest in rejoining the European Union. So why are they doing favours for the European Union? That's my question. And I think this has something to do with Keir Starmer's bargaining position with the European Union in being able to negotiate some kind of trade treaty with the European Union, which is not membership of the EU, but which advantages British companies when they come to deal with the European Union. So there are a number of things at play here. The only winners in this are Jim Ratcliffe personally, because he gets everything he wants, Petro-Ineos because it gets everything it wants, and the UK government because it gets what it wants, which is two things. Scotland diminished, unable to refine and unable to support itself easily when it becomes independent. And on the other side of the coin, making it easier for Keir Starmer to negotiate some kind of trade deal with the EU because he can show that he's guaranteeing investment into an EU corporation. All of this, this cloak and dagger stuff has been done under the guise of the British government saying, oh, we can't do anything about it. It's a business decision. But it's very far from being just a business decision. I think we can all see that it is very far from being just a business decision. This change in Scotland's status as an oil producing and refining country now means that Scottish oil can be uploaded directly into tankers at sea in the North Sea, bypassing Scotland's infrastructure completely, even bypassing pipelines into English refineries, and have the entire load shipped all the way down to Belgium directly to be refined there and sold on into Europe. Actually, if you think about it, this is going to deprive the UK economy of tax revenues, because that oil is no longer going to pass through any English ports or Scottish ports or any of our infrastructure on its way to the European Union. And of course, the payback for the Labour Party and the Labour government is that they'll have a better bargaining position when it comes to dealing with the European Union in future. All of which works out brilliantly for the UK, Jim Ratcliffe and the Chinese. And I think you can see now that the United Kingdom, very far from being a democracy, is in fact turning itself into a Trump-style oligarchy, in which billionaires are the people who are courted, who are cosseted, given bribes, given gifts, in order to basically achieve the aims of a government. Now that means that the British government is effectively being manipulated in many ways by both international corporations owned by the Chinese and obviously people like Jim Ratcliffe as an oligarch, into doing what is best for all of them. In other words, enriching the oligarchs, enriching the big corporations, and serving the political ends of a British government which doesn't care whether Scotland becomes poorer or not. It probably doesn't even care whether English refineries become poorer or not, because it improves their external relations with the EU. All of this, I think, when you think about it, is beginning to hang together. Now, I would like to emphasize before anyone else jumps on me for making mistakes in this program that these are my opinions and these are not necessarily facts. On this program, I've spent the last 10, 11 years basically joining the dots between the kind of things that happen in the news and in politics and in business, and figuring out how these all relate to one another in the broader scheme of things when it comes to international and national politics. Either way, the loss of Grangemouth is a strategic move by the UK government to disempower Scotland and to give itself a bargaining position with the European Union, whilst at the same time enriching people like Jim Ratcliffe and keeping the Chinese investors in the massive oil corporation happy. All of which is not good for the UK, and it's not good for Scotland, even in fact it's far, far worse for Scotland. But when we do become independent, we have to remember that the political and business landscape has now shifted away from us, and we need to reinvent ourselves perhaps in a different way. We may not ever get back to where we have been before in terms of our oil and gas and our ability to refine it or to sell it, but we have many other resources to call upon which we haven't developed yet, one of which I mentioned several times over the last few years, and that's tidal energy, of which we have a lot, and it is not developed in any way fully yet. There have been some attempts to bring tidal energy on stream in a small way, but so far it's not been exploited enough. That is where I would put our investment capital once we are independent. Anyway, that's it from me today. I hope you've enjoyed the content of today's program. As usual, contact me if you have questions or if you want to correct any mistakes. By all means, feel free. I'll happily admit if I've made an error. Also, I would like to ask you, if you're still in the mood to do it, to donate to Inde-Car when you can. As you know, I sort of scrape along on whatever people can afford to give me. So if you are able to make a donation to Inde-Car, please use one of the links. I'll post a fresh one on both X and Blue Sky later on today. But that's it from Inde-Car today. As usual, keep the faith, and I'll see you later in the week. Bye for now.